inviting me along there this afternoon. Just a little bit of background about myself, quick 90-second sort of overview. As Will says, seasoned, I think, is the word usually to describe my 30 years in food and drink. Half of that was in corporate life, starting life with the Coca-Cola company, really working through the ranks in sales, marketing, national accounts, business development, and finance. And then in the mid-80s, I joined the Cadbury company to head up the new business development strategy in the UK. And that was finding new markets, really from the pressure from the major retailers controlling revenues and brand at the point of purchase. So we had to find new routes to market. And that really followed on in 98 with a global program, head of global business development for Cadbury Schweppes, which is a great job. Traveled some 60 countries, but worked with some fantastic partners. McDonald's, with the launch of McFlurry, ExxonMobil, Shell, British Airways, British Airports Authority, and Tesco. So quite a wide range of experience on the global front. And then spent 2 years in the last part of corporate life with Ferrero, heading up their business development team, which is quite a cultural change from working with Cadbury, which was driven by shareholders in terms of their demands. Ferrero is still a family company and owned by the Ferrero family, Giovanni and Pietro Ferrero. So quite a cultural change in working for Ferrero, but nevertheless enjoyable. And then in 2006, broke away, I got off the corporate treadmill and set up my own business, consultancy business, working primarily with consumer-related businesses, mainly SMEs. We've worked with well over 100 over the last 10, 15 years. And we work on a 4-point model, which is driven by free cash flow to invest, latest data and research and creativity, and building a 3-year business plan and creating organisational capability to deliver that business plan. Basically, in a nutshell, what we've been doing. I live in Gloucestershire. I live on the edge of Rodborough Common. I've been there for some 20 odd years. We're about 5 minutes from the Bear of Rodborough, if anybody knows that area. My family have flown the nest. My daughter's just about to give birth to her second grandchild, so I'll become a granddaughter, will become a granddaughter for the second time. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
So just before we get into the meet and excuse the pun, the meet and drink, there is a chat area. So if people do have questions as we go through, please put those questions into the chat area. We'll pick those up as we go along, and we'll also pick other questions up at the end. So there will be opportunities for questions and answers as we go through. So obviously lots happened in the last 6 months. Paul, what's your just overview of the food and drink sector at the moment?
Yeah, you're right. Lots have happened, but broadly there are 3 key areas. We've seen significant growth, significant change in consumer behaviour, which impacts on companies' financial, competitive, and growth performance. So no shadow of a doubt that there are significant changes in terms of how consumers buy. But also as well, what is happening now and what is happening in the future. And I think that's important. We've coped very much with the past 6 months. It's very much focusing on what's happening in the future in terms of consumer change. Hence our 3 A's: analyse, adapt, and act. Over the next sort of hour or so, we're really going to take a look at some of the data analysis of what's happening in the market from a consumer point of view, how businesses need to adapt to those changes, and that throws up opportunity. But I think the underlying point is to act fast. Clearly, with the infection rates going the wrong way, and potential impacts on businesses, moving fast is important, and also is to get ahead of the competition. So that's really the second area. And the third area really is what we have is a mosaic of change. And that mosaic really are connected together into 3 key areas. Really the risks that businesses face in terms of the current environment and moving forward. And I think the risks fall into a couple of key points. One is clearly employee and customer well-being is a priority for businesses. And interestingly, making COVID-safe environments, both at work and in the market. Still some 2/3 of customers are lacking confidence or wary of moving into areas where there are large gatherings, pubs, shops, shopping centres. So there's still a clear lack of confidence there. And that's going to continue to impact on footfall. I think what we've been through as well is coping with financial resilience. We've many taken advantage of the government schemes. They're starting to wind down now. We've gone through the cost-cutting phase, saving money, and really strengthening our balance sheet and preparedness for the future. Depending on, again, government decisions and regulation, if we further lockdowns that are on the horizon, clearly we need to be in a position to protect our financial situation. And then the third area really is looking forward and creating what I call rapid revenue recovery. And those are the quick areas, the quick wins that can be secured to drive revenue, with a view to investing in free cash for future growth. And if you take that financial platform, how does that move into growing business and opportunity? Well, as I say, we've seen significant change in consumer behaviour, and in fact there are 8 areas that we've seen consumer change that have affected all aspects of consumer behaviour in the food and drink sector. I'm going to take a look at some of those in a moment. But as a result of that, bringing the situation in terms of financial stability and consumer change, it really requires businesses to adjust and be agile and adapt their business model. And not only in the commercial sense, but also operationally, supply chain, procurement, finance, people. So it does require some significant change in how businesses react to the environment and to the financial pressures on finance. And not to forget as well, looking forward into next year, at that time we're starting to budget and forecast for next year, and we have Brexit on the horizon as well. So the complexity and demands of how we budget and forecast for next year are even more challenging than ever before. But also an opportunity to look at your productivity. We're going to touch on some of the areas, not in terms of sales and marketing, but also people productivity and the demand for new skills. And that's new skills from the top of the company, from the CEO right through to the shop floor. But if you take those 2 key areas, risk and opportunity, I was looking at some Bain research, Bain and Company, and during the 2008 financial crisis, those businesses that took opportunities in that period actually grew 4 times faster in the preceding 7 years. So from 2010 to 2017, the research from Bain was telling us that those businesses that did take opportunities during the financial crisis grew 4 times faster than their peers and competitors, which does reflect in terms of the opportunity we have at the moment. Really then moving into that sort of third part of the mosaic and connecting together the growth part, the growth phase. What this is throwing up is a whole load of new data and analytics, and I've been measuring and researching the food market now for the best part of 15 years, and you can rely on certain predictions in terms of the market to make business decisions. We have a complete new set of data and analytics now to work with, and almost anything pre-COVID in terms of data and research has become obsolete. And this is a moving feast. It's a very fluid situation. I've just picked up some data analytics from only yesterday on how business dynamics are changing. I'll touch on a few of those in a moment. But the real sort of key drivers, which we're going to really focus on for the next sort of hour, is really the impact of digital transformation. And that digital transformation is not only e-commerce, it is around data collection, it's around fulfillment, customer service, the complete and brand new customer journey, as we've seen how shoppers do buy and how shoppers do make purchasing decisions. But the exciting part about this and this change and this opportunity is the chance to develop new products and innovation. And I'll give some examples a little later of some of the businesses we're working with and how we're developing new product development into the food sector in health and nutrition, and also as well route to market. But innovation covers many areas. It's not only product development, but also supply chain, procurement, finance, people. So innovation is by its definition very, very broad and wide. So effectively what we have today is this mosaic of change, complex change, which I've really tried to connect up into those 3 areas of risk, opportunity and growth.
Yeah, I think what strikes me about the slide really is that, you know, we're being asked, again, as business leaders to do lots more things in a sense. There's lots of things on the slide that we need to be aware of. And I guess they've always been there in the background, but it just seems to me that they're so much more intense now and so much more focused. So, you know, one of the questions I think for me is, how do we get hold of these new skills? We need new skills in all of these areas, I guess, within the organisation, or we need these resources. What's the best way of getting hold of these skills?
I think that it's a good question, Will. I think there are a number of areas, given the demand on skills. One is clearly learning, internal learning. And there are lots of platforms, online platforms, coaching, training, help you can get for in-house learning. But I think also as well, the options are you can import talent, you can recruit new skills very quickly, particularly in the area of digital, for example, as another way. And the other is to create partners and collaboration. I'm a great advocate of that, and I've worked with some great businesses over the years, and I've learned an awful lot from the way they do things. So I think partnership and collaboration, where there's a skills need and those skills complementary, I think is another route to getting that quick learning and capability and skills. So in-house learning, having the right partners and collaborating and recruiting and importing talented skills very quickly into the areas of need.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think, again, if you kind of summarize that, we need to generate some cash to invest in product development or innovation in order to more closely match what customers are now demanding of us. So interested next to look at some aspects of, how consumer life is changing, which I think is next, yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the previous slide, every aspect of consumer life has changed. And I think as a business, it begs the question to redefine your channel strategy and how you go to market and where your current customers are and potentially where new customers are, and really understanding them. And I mentioned the 8, and I'm not going to go through all 8 in detail, but just headline the relevance and implications for food and drink. Clearly, shopping and consumption habits have changed significantly. And probably the leader of that is no new news here, that digital transformation. We've seen decades of growth being achieved in a matter of months. So the speed of which that growth is achieved, and if you look at forecasts moving forward, the online food and drink market is set to grow another 60% by 2023. So that opens up a lot of opportunity clearly in digital. But also another challenge as well, convenience. Well, convenience has just become even more convenient. Shopping local in the high street, and just looking at some figures this morning, the co-op is showing a 13% growth. But the top of the pile, just not too far behind Ocado, the independent sector and small convenience have grown 31% during the first half of this year. In fact, all these figures up to September. So you've seen significant growth in local. So independence, provenance, local supply, ethics, supply chain, all of those are playing into an important part in terms of opportunity and really a bit of a rejuvenation with independence. We've also seen growth in other areas and new markets, home delivery, meal kits, people like HelloFresh and Gusto seeing significant growth, and we'll see a little later the level of investment they're putting into their business. But there's an interesting bit of a conundrum. Supermarkets have seen growth. Many have seen double-digit growth. Tesco 10%, Asda 12%. The discounters have grown double-digit growth. But really, in terms of profitability, there's been a cost to achieve that growth. Obviously, cost of COVID, but they're very asset-heavy. So in terms of cost of doing business, their margins have been squeezed. But also looking from a supplier point of view, Fevertree, who've been into the market probably just over 10, 15 years now. They announced their interim profit results a few days ago, and they've actually seen a 20% decline in profits, but their supermarket business is up 25%. The reason being, and this is down to channel mix and profitability, the majority of their high margin business lies within the on-trade and pubs, 45% of the business in pubs. So what we're seeing is this changing profitability and mix in supermarkets and major suppliers who are seeing revenue growth, but not necessarily profit growth. So that's an important consideration for business in selecting which channels they continue to operate in and which channels, new channels, they could operate in the future. And then just picking up a couple of the other key points, health and well-being, 31% increase in consumers eating healthy, and significant growth in vegan, free from, and also in plant-based foods. And entertainment, the big night in, clearly video streaming has seen significant growth. This is probably what I call the indulgence area, because when you do have that big night in watching that film on Netflix, you still sort of have that need for reward, indulgence, and you've seen the likes of Domino's and the pizza companies do very well here. So it's not only necessarily about health and nutrition, there is that sort of need for comfort foods and indulgence. Probably the two big areas that have struggled, and no great surprise here, the travel and at work market. And clearly, as a business, if you're reliant upon those channels, and I have some clients who are reliant on the travel sector, is to really very quickly look at other routes to market and new channels to grow. And then finally, really from a personal point of view, I think all of us, with our communication, Zoom now is probably probably the highest and fastest growing brand in the last 6 months. I think it's become an everyday part of our life. And rather than saying I'm going to a meeting, I'm going to Zoom, I think it's a generic term that's replaced meeting as Google has for search. And probably in terms of learning, I've watched more webinars in the last 5 months than I've tuned into than I have in the last 5 years. So how we do things in terms of communication and learning has impacted certainly on consumer change, but also on the market. But finally, just to underpin that, Will, Pret a Manger yesterday announced their new strategy, and clearly they've gone through changes, and they're very asset heavy, and they are very much building a multi-channel strategy in terms of route to market. And their mantra has been follow the customer, or follow their consumers, and they're setting a subscription service up for home delivery, not only teas and coffees, but also sandwich and snack lunches as well. So we're seeing evidence that the big players are adjusting their strategy accordingly. Sorry, Will.
So I think it's really positive to hear that independents are doing so. You know, the growth there is quite strong, because I guess everybody on this webinar is running an independent business. So I think that's really positive. I guess the flip side, a little bit, hearing this is it sounds like quite a scary proposition to think about. We might need to change our channel, how we get to our consumers. So anything you can say about that in terms of put my mind at rest, or how do we deal with some of the risks of changing our model and adopting a new channel?
That's a good question, Will. I think looking at channels, we have to prioritise those channels. We can't be all things to all people and operating all of them. So prioritising those channels is important. I think scoping them and deciding which channels to develop are based on a number of things. One is the financial return in that channel, and clearly can I achieve not only profitable returns but also cash and revenue. Secondly, I think the competitive intensity in those channels. A lot of channels are very busy and there's a lot of competition, and usually that then falls into price as a differentiator. I think thirdly, logistics and distribution. How do I reach that market? And I've referred it back to collaboration and partnerships. If it is a home delivery, do I partner the appropriate home delivery team or company to take my product physically to market? So I think in answer to your question, Will, it really is prioritising probably 3, maybe 4 markets you can operate in, so you mitigate that risk. If one starts to fail or cash dries up in that particular channel, like travel or work, I have to continue in developing other channels, which I've really thought about in terms of my future business planning, and that will help with forecasting and budgeting as well.
Well,
sorry, I'm just sort of taking a point from there, moving forward. We talked about routes to market and channel strategy, redefining our channel strategy. But what we're seeing really is a complete change in the consumer journey, a brand new consumer journey in how consumers make their purchase decisions. I'm just going to demonstrate that with an example of the gifting market, the food gifting market. The market is worth £3.3 billion. There are 29 gifting occasions a year. And usually the start of that gifting process is what information, what knowledge do I need to make my purchases, and how do consumers get that information? And that usually starts with a question. And if you think about the gifting market, Christmas fast approaching, which is the biggest gifting time of the year, is usually saying, what do I buy for my dad? He's a connoisseur of good malt whiskey, so I think I'll buy him something a little bit different. And clearly getting that information on which malt whiskey to buy for your dad will take into a number of considerations. Is where do I buy it? Do I buy it online, or do I buy it in the high street? Do I buy it from the supermarket? Do I buy it in a specialist spirit suppliers? What am I purchasing in terms of that decision-making process? And brand is playing an important part during the COVID period. Trusted brands have really come to the light. A lot of brands have been reinvigorated, but also we're seeing consumers are quite promiscuous, and 44% of purchasers have engaged new brands. So we're seeing a lot of brands switching to new brands, and again, in terms of new businesses and brand building, there's a window of opportunity. But I think the other important thing, and what we're seeing in terms of consumer purchase, importance of personalisation and packaging. Again, using malt whisky as an example, as much as the malt whisky is good, it tastes good, and it's my favourite brand, personalising that through packaging. And we've seen many, many examples of successful businesses over the last 10, 15 years, people like Moonpig, Jumps to Hand, Hotel Chocolat, in terms of packaging, premium chocolates, and personalisation has built a business on that concept and online. So there are many, many factors that consumers now are considering, and probably quite fickle in terms of that choice. And it's that time of choice that they have and that research determining that purchase decision. But the most important part for me really is that final part, that consumer experience, because what we want in that new experience in terms of consumer behaviour is brand loyalty and repeat purchase. And we're aiming to build that advocacy and become a brand ambassador, not only to buy the product again, but also as well to use posts on their own social media platform to share their experience, negative or positive, and hopefully it's a positive one. So what we've seen is a lot of quick brand build and product distribution through positive posting and platforms that our market will use. The final part that really is saying that simple experience is how do we measure it? How do we get feedback? And using that feedback to build new insights and data, so the whole cycle starts again. So you're really continually understanding what those needs are in terms of that next generation of purchase. And if you look at, so we mentioned Hotel Chocolat, people like Graves, who build a brand, online brand with 7 million shoppers. That gives a real wealth of data in terms of product development and moving into the retail sector. HelloFresh, another example, who use data and insights, Gusto. So there are very good elements of businesses that use real-time, ongoing data and insight to build their business.
Yeah, I think what's really, again, you know, I think the customer journey is something we hear a lot about. Lots of people talk about the customer journey in all businesses, frankly. But when you look at that slide, I think what really strikes me is the bits that have really changed are, you know, the beginning and the end. So, you know, we're now dealing with educated consumers, whether it's website, whether it's reviews, as you said, from other customers. You know, our consumers are educated now. I think that's something that's changed a lot over the last few years. And then the experience at the end. So people don't just want to buy a product anymore, do they? They want to be part of a tribe. They want to feel part of something that's making a difference, or whatever it is. But it's almost a bit on the front and a bit on the end, I think, which has really significantly changed for us. And as you said, it's just a loop. So the customer experience is then feeding back and informing the next lot of consumers. But again, one of the things that, you know, for me is, you look at that and you think, well, it's impacting every part of our business model. What part of our business model as business owners is not impacted by, you know, what's on the screen there? Educated consumers, the experience that they need, innovation of the product. So what product are they buying? Why are they buying it? And actually, where are they buying it now? You know, it seems to me that it affects every part of the business model. Would you agree?
Yeah, yes, I would. And it's really back to where would I buy that product and the channel strategy, selecting the channels that are right for your product proposition and your target market. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of understanding your market in a moment and target market, but selecting the product channels in terms of that choice. I think that first part in terms of search, and there's some very good examples in terms of search. For example, home cooking and recipes. Search online for recipes has grown 300% during lockdown. Search for fresh produce has grown 100%. So that search, that first stage of the consumer journey in terms of search and the questions that you put yourself into the mind of your target market, what questions are they asking and which platforms are they searching on? Again, there was some recent data from a company called Data Metrics, and 78% of search has been Amazon. So it's really a no-brainer in terms of, yes, you need to have an Amazon presence. 54% on eBay, and surprisingly, only 35% on Google, which are a little bit down the list in terms of search. So where your presence needs to be in that right search engine, and that's the first part of that engagement. And really, you have to surpass those expectations all the way through the journey, through to that purchase and that post experience, to build that advocacy and repeat purchase, and to share that positive experience with relative followers.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, I think just taking through from channel strategy and the consumer journey, one of the learnings really I picked up from my early days, certainly in corporate, is the key of having a point of differentiation and competitive advantage in this market. It's always been tough. I mean, food and drink is probably the most competitive market out of many sectors. I think the one area we've seen in terms of focus, and there's good examples, and I'll do some case studies in a moment about startup businesses who've been tremendously successful in creating an advantage in the health and nutrition market. As I mentioned, as a result of the lockdown, we've seen a 31% increase in healthy eating. And that can be sub-segmented into a number of categories, free from, vegan, plant-based ingredients, sugar reduction. And if you just look at some of the figures and growth pre-COVID, free from was set to grow another 43% by 2023. In the vegan market, Vegan Society reporting 1 in 5 consumers now, as a result of lockdown, are avoiding meat products. So we've seen significant changes pre-COVID and during the lockdown that have indicated the growth potential in these sectors. But I think the important thing is what we're going to be seeing is on the second sort of part of that journey, weight loss, vitamin supplements, and immune protection, is people's awareness of building their own immunity against the virus, and hence we've seen significant changes in health advice and also as well in terms of purchase, particularly in the vitamin supplement markets and products that give immunity and protection against health risks. So there's sort of two parts of the market that we're seeing in terms of health and nutrition growth. I'll give you a couple of examples really of businesses that have been successful in securing growth in this sector. First is a company called Oggs, which is a business that was set up in 2018. And they really have taken the market by storm and taken the sort of growth process from 2018 with listings in Waitrose, Sainsbury, and Asda. And I was just taking a look at their financial performance since launch. And if you look at their company accounts in the first year, they were sat with £500,000 in free cash in the bank, ready to invest in further growth. They have a net worth of well over £600,000 in the first year, which is quite unprecedented and phenomenal for a startup business. But interesting as well, they haven't taken out any external loans or equity to support their growth. So it's a good example of a business that started very recently in the health sector and has grown significantly. So it's a good example, a good testimony of what can be achieved very quickly within the health sector. I think the other important part as well in the health sector is really understand your market and really understand those consumer needs. And looking at the children's market and desire for mums who are the gatekeeper to make their decisions on nutritional requirements for children, particularly in low fat, low sugar, low salt reduction. Half of parents are saying to us they want more choice for kids in the kids market. And particularly as we look at legislation and moving confectionery and sweets off the checkouts in major supermarkets, clearly there are attempts there in terms of space and opportunity for new brands to come into the marketplace that do offer nutritional benefits for children. So think about again that sector, and mum's the gatekeeper. She's the one who makes the decisions and creates those habits with young children in the health and nutrition sector.
Yeah, again, I think that's an interesting point just to reflect on for a moment, the difference between the customer and the consumer. So the parent, the mother, perhaps is the customer makes the buy decision, probably influenced by the consumer in these cases. I remember what my kids were like and what they wanted to eat. But obviously the kids eat it, the parents buy it. So there's a reflection there on the difference between the customer that you're dealing with and the consumer. The Og story, again, I think it's a really positive story. I think we're probably, as small business owners, slightly skeptical about some of these big stories and unicorn companies that are worth £1 billion and never made any money. So it's good to hear a startup actually making some money. But is health and nutrition, is it a bit of a fad, do you think? What's coming down the line for Ogs? What's their challenges coming up, do you think?
I think there's a number they have to consider. One is they're scaling up very quickly, and there's access to finance and working capital, and scaling up and being able to support their cash requirements. Bearing in mind as well, they're working in the supermarket sector, and they traditionally can be 60, sometimes 90 days on payment. So cash flow will be a key challenge, and we need to think about other markets outside the major supermarkets, which will help their cash situation and their margin performance as well, as I mentioned earlier. I think the other thing is competition. Good ideas get copied. I mean, predominantly also is an egg-free product, baking product, dairy product, and competition will copy. And I think not only branded competition, but the own label market, the big supermarkets are very quick to copy good ideas and bring out an own label equivalent. I think those are two key things that they're going to be challenged with: competition and scaling up, and access to finance to fund that scaling up moving forward. Just interestingly, there's a client I'm working with at the moment, and we've just developed a range of products that are just about to be launched in one of the big four next week. And this particular retailer is labelling this launch as the biggest of the year, and it's around the vegan category. But quite interesting, we've been a little bit cute in using technology in store and point of sale material and promotion. What we've done is put a QR code on each of the products, on the packaging and on the point of sale, which the consumer or the shopper in store can just swipe their phone or their tablet and bring up a recipe on how to use that product. So you've got instant advice on how the product can be used as a vegan product in home baking. As I say, we've seen a significant increase in home cooking and recipes and search as well. So we're taking that facility in store by simply using a QR code. And I think QR codes, we've seen a real resurgence on using QR codes and familiarity of using QR codes when we're going to restaurants and pubs and swiping our phones for track and trace purposes. So just simple things like that and bringing technology in store, and it's been very well received by this particular big four retailer as something that, yes, we can apply that, and it helps shoppers who are looking for recipe ideas and inspiration in store. So there's lots of tactical things you can do quite quickly in terms of sell-through in store and breaking away from the traditional sort of packaging and point of sale by using technology.
Yeah, I think, again, well, good luck with that product launch. That sounds like quite exciting. But I think, again, it's interesting how these things all weave together, don't they? So actually, we talked about educated consumers, and actually consumers are looking for that, aren't they? Looking for, so even when they're buying the product, the packaging, opportunity there, but actually to educate them again in terms of how they use the products. If our products are a little bit innovative and different, and we need to think about, people won't buy if they don't understand what they are or what they're buying. So again, there's a link there back to the education piece, I think.
Yes, and it goes back to the consumer journey. That experience of you buying this particular vegan products in the store, and it's running 258 stores from Monday. Is that experience of, yes, I know how to use it, I've created my own dish from it, and I will become an ambassador and post my experience online. So, the whole cycle then starts again. So it is building in that digital part of being a cornerstone of your strategy going forward. And interesting as well, again, another client we're working with at the moment, we're using plant-based ingredients to accelerate sugar reduction in confectionery. And this is using chicory root as a substitute, which is far more hygienic and healthier and more natural than using the traditional substitutes for sugar. So there are lots and lots of things there in terms of sourcing procurement that you can do to create that point of differentiation. And as I say, it is a very, very competitive market, so you continue looking for that point of differentiation. If you don't, it will usually come back to price, and price means margin pressure, cost of doing business. So that differentiation journey is never ending. There's never a destination there. And good ideas get copied. As I said earlier, there's no protection there on that good ideas that come to the market.
Let's talk digital transformation, Paul. That's a big subject.
Yeah, the final part, and that's that mosaic. I just really wanted to kick off by what's happening in the market, and I'll talk about digital transformation in a wider context, and not only e-commerce and social media. It's far broader. It's the heart, really, I think, of all businesses moving forward. But a couple of weeks ago, I was invited to a supplier webinar from Ocado, and it was the new CEO, lady called Melanie Smith, Australian lady, wanted to share the growth experience they've been through in the last 6 months, but also what the future holds for Ocado. And I think, to be fair, and she quite said, Ocado, a lot of people dismissed Ocado in the early days. I remember Terry Leahy at Tesco was quite dismissive. And boy, has it come back to bite them, because Ocado really have been at the cutting edge and leading growth in the online food and drink sector, and a lot have to play catch up. But Ocado are investing £1 billion. They've raised it through financing to double their capacity in the next 5 years, which is great. And they see significant growth over the next 5 years. But the thing I really learned about that webinar is that this is part of an integrated strategy, and it just demonstrates how digital can play the centre of that. And the other areas of that strategy are really around controlling food waste, sustainability, environment, innovation. They're increasing their headcount by 50% in terms of innovation and new markets, which is an opportunity for new suppliers as well, because some of those categories are seeking product development and innovation. But the other key part is the partnership. They're just structural. They're starting to operate now with Marks & Spencer at the beginning of September. And that's given them access to 12 million Marks & Spencer shoppers. And they're already seeing in those early days a 52% increase year on year, combined with the impact of COVID on their business. So getting those right partners and it's been the expense of Waitrose is already paying dividends. So Ocado are in a good place, and they were well ahead of the curve before the lockdown in terms of online food and drink supply and home delivery. I mentioned Gusto earlier, again, £33 million future investment, but you know what? Gusto's principle primarily is a meal kit solution for evening time. But if you think about working from home and home convenience, the same opportunities there for lunchtime, the same opportunities there for breakfast, the same opportunities there for creating that restaurant experience, that fine dining in home. So I'm not eating out, I'm having a dinner party, following the rule of 6 at home. So if you think about the market space in home delivery meal kits and recipe solutions, Gusto and HelloFresh, Simply Cook, yeah, they're all key players, but there's a lot of market space there in those other day part categories. And the Good Old Co-op, you know, they've seen 13% growth, benefit from local shopping, but their investment in delivery, which are now established in 400 stores, and they're just starting a trial in Bristol with a new business called Buy Me, which is a similar service to Deliveroo. So again, they've really thought about how they can take the convenience sector to its next stage in terms of evolution. And they're saying that I think so convenience has become a little bit more convenient now. Flipping on the other side, and who's been doing well during lockdown, Company Lounges, who are a Bristol-based company, they've been operating 10, 12 years now and have grown phenomenally. But since they reopened in early July, they've seen a 30% increase in sales year on year. Their share price has recovered 35% in the last month, and they've actually been investing in new sites in the last month. 2 new sites have opened. They're doing something, whether it's their product proposition, their location. They're very wide appealing to a broad church in terms of markets and consumers, but have a close look in there. They're obviously doing something that's working well. And it really does come back to those 3 areas there, 4 areas of opportunity and case studies that we've mentioned, is really understanding your market and who are the influencers in your market, and influencers influence what we eat, as the line says there. And we talked about mums, but thinking about the younger market, the 18 to 24-year-old and 24 to 35-year-old, the Gen Z and millennials, primarily they have a relatively higher level of discretionary spend at this moment in time. They save money and they have money in their pockets to spend in a number of areas. But thinking about that influencer market, They are regular online reviewers. They like personalization. They're healthy eaters. They enjoy the fact of giving feedback and influencing product development. They like to be part of online focus groups to shape what their needs are. They're aspirational. They're experiential. So all those markets, those younger markets, really think about focusing in terms of product proposition and product value and the experience for that particular market. And again, if you just go back to Ricardo, Gusto, Co-op and Lounges, got a clearly defined market, and they really understand what their customers want and what their future customers want as well. There's no doubt that is continuing to change. But if you bring all that together in terms of the digital part of that, as I say, it's very much a cornerstone, the heart of future business moving forward. We've talked a lot about who's your market, use of data, new business models, the new customer journey. But that's only one half of it. Clearly, what I call the back end of digital, fulfillment, logistics, supply chain, the last mile, the customer service experience, all those count are important in terms of loyalty and support for those particular digital channels. We mentioned Amazon, the choice of search, 78% of search. Why do people go to Amazon, which is far and away above their nearest search competitors, eBay and Google? And a big part of that clearly is brand, the significant power of the Amazon brand, but also brand matters in terms of those choice of products. And I mentioned earlier that 44% of shoppers, both in-store and online, are buying new brands. And there's a market space and market gaps there for new brands to build that brand equity, that brand trust, that brand value. So there's probably been no better time to launch brands into the market and getting that brand and product proposition absolutely spot on in terms of what your target market needs are. And really the final part of that, and this is really looking into the future, the food and drink market are probably a little bit behind the curve in terms of the use of artificial intelligence. What this is giving us is a whole set of new data and insights and analytics to use. And AI will play an important and growing part in terms of that decision making. A lot of the major retailers are using it already, but as a supplier, and particularly a small supplier, don't overlook the opportunity and the impact and the implications that AI can have for your business. So digital transformation is very much certainly about the e-commerce side, but there's a lot more that supports it. And I think as a must-do in terms of future business planning, digital has to play a key and leading role.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. We've got a couple of questions coming, but I think I'll look back to those at the end. I think we've talked a lot about business models. We've talked a lot about consumers and change, and I think COVID. One of the key questions then is what does this mean for us as business leaders? So yeah, I'm just interested in again your thoughts on leadership. What does leadership look like in this COVID environment, in the new era, if you like? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think when we start to think about business modelling and business plan, I always found, again from experience, that's the relatively easier part. Delivering it and implementing it and making it happen is the real challenge. And that's where I think leadership now in the new era puts new demands on leaders. We've talked about agility and the ability to move very quickly and to be flexible. I think in terms of leadership and delivering your new business model requires not only financial resilience and commercial resilience, but also human resilience. And I'm always a great advocate of those softer skills that are required in changing a business. And for some companies, this will mean probably a cultural change and significant change. So managing change and maintain that resilience in that change process is a key attribute a leader needs to demonstrate. Remember, the leader is the role model. You have to walk the talk. We talked about really understanding your consumers and your customer needs, but a lot of that in terms of new markets, and if you think about new channels, it does require a startup mindset. So almost starting with a blank sheet of paper, how would I build my business plan if I wanted to move into a new market, probably an unrelated market? So you really have to put the entrepreneurial hat on and break away from the traditional areas of leadership. And a lot of leaders, tend to get very involved in the day-to-day running of a business. That is a real change in your comfort zone. And a lot of businesses I've worked with, particularly in the SME sector and in large corporates as well, find it difficult to break out of that comfort zone because they've had years and years and years of traditional practices, which they now have to change. And that requires that point of reskilling and learning and capability. Don't try to do that alone. There's help and support, and I mentioned the areas of training and development and skilling in-house, establishing the right partnerships, and also as well bringing the right talents into the business. So don't try and do that alone in terms of skill development. Get help that's available to help you deliver against that new challenge that we have in delivering a new business model. But I think what we're going to see in terms of leadership and change is a real demand on current leaders, incumbent leaders, and new leaders to make that cultural change in business, to do things differently, and not get too close to the brick wall. You only see the bricks. Take that step back and look beyond the brick wall. And this is what we're doing now, back to earlier Mosaic, of looking into the growth opportunities in the future. And just to underpin that, Bain and Co research, businesses in the lockdown in 2008 that took opportunity grew 4 times as fast as their peers in the preceding 7 years, from 2010 to 2017. So that's where the real opportunity to make that step change in terms of culture and organisational change in your business. The biggest risk, doing nothing. Don't sit on your hands and wait. Tomorrow will not be better at the moment. A lot of people say it does, but it will be, but it won't. Now it's time to control and act fast, act nimbly.
I think there's a couple of things on the slide that sort of resonate with me. One is resilience. We've touched on financial resilience, and Nigel made the comment that Oggs made a £460,000 loss in December 2019. So there's some financial resilience elements to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think again the interesting thing about that is, we are going to take some risks here. If we're going to innovate, we are going to take some risks. And we do need to have some finance behind us. And I think that the B bills and the C bills and money that we've had from the government, one of the things I am talking to clients about is not sitting on that money forever. We need to think about how we invest some of that money to to reinvent the business model. I think as independent small businesses, the startup mindset, I think is probably something we always have. Certainly compared to perhaps some of the big corporates, the PLCs that would like to get that innovative startup mindset. So I think we are just naturally more agile as smaller businesses. And the other thing is the comfort zone. I pretty much guarantee we all feel a little bit outside of our comfort zones at the moment. And what we are seeing from clients, we've always run business leader groups, but we are finding, this is the webinar format today, but we are finding that we're getting 20, 30 clients logging into some of our online chats, webinar type presentations, where they can just talk to other business people and hear similar problems. And I think there's a demand for that kind of support. To build personal resilience as much as anything is again important, and actually perhaps touches on some of the collaboration aspects as well. So people want to be able to collaborate with each other. They want to be able to work together. They want to hear other stories, because actually they do have the ability to change quickly. But you're absolutely right. I did see a quote yesterday. Success is 10% strategy and 90% action. So I think you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't actually try and implement it. So we need to be a bit brave, I think, in terms of implementation. Things will go a bit wrong. Oggs are making a loss. Maybe that was anticipated. Do they have the financial investment to support? But some of the things will go wrong, but that's the agility. We've got to try stuff. If it's not working, change it. And never been more important to get close to our customers. What do our customers need? Very consumer centric. What do we understand what our customers and consumers want, and how can we adapt our products to match that? So important at the moment, I think. Good. Yeah. I think we're nearly there, Paul.
I think just to add a point there, Will, and it's just like you're talking now, I've talked about being a role model in the business, and we talked about the things that we need to be thinking about as new leaders, but not underestimate the power of passion, energy, and determination. Mm-hmm. And if you've got that effective resilience, you're demonstrating that to your team, and you're bringing your team along with you, and you can create that same passion, energy, and resilience in your team. It's a big help in getting to your end goals and delivering your plan and implementing it.
Yeah. So perhaps we come to a couple of questions now.
Yeah.
Touch on what we're going to do next. Next steps for us, just to be clear for everybody. So we are going to ask for your feedback on today in the webinar and the content, and actually what you'd like to hear more of next. So we're looking to run another webinar in a month or a couple of months. So it'd be interesting to know what more depth we can go into on some of these topics for people. As a follow-up today, we will be in contact for a 30-minute one-on-one consultation. So we want to sit down with you and give you that opportunity. Paul will do a bit of research on your specific area, segment of the market, so we can give you some real valuable data and what's going on in the market. So that's something that we'll be in contact with you all about. There is an LAP grant. I think Gloucester is slightly behind the curve, if I'm honest. So 1 or 2 other counties are ahead, but this is a fully funded up to three grand for post-COVID support, so to help you change your business and move forward. And that's money. I'm sure Paul and I will be very happy if you spent that with us. But it's going to be launched on the 28th of the 9th. There are some information there, but if you want to know more, just drop Joe a line and we'll send you some information on that. A couple of questions that have come in. Alistair from Willens has asked about what's going on with the physical property market currently. How's that affecting the food and drink sector? He's seeing prime retail spaces becoming available, and in one case being taken up by a food and drink client. So I'd perhaps jump in first slightly and say, well, I'm just really fascinated by the the commercial property market. What's actually going to happen there with the changes and going on in retail plus office space? You just wonder whether tenants are ever going to sign up for long 25-year leases anymore. I think they want more flexible space. That'll be more expensive in the short term, but I think it's about flexibility rather than signing up for long leases, which of course landlords are very used to long-term leases with big players. So I think it's interesting to see what will happen there. But in terms of impacting the food and drink market sector, Paul, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the food and drink market inherently is asset heavy, and whether it's a restaurant, a coffee shop, an independent store, or a big supermarket, they do have commercial property space, and there is a fixed cost to a business. So I think there's a challenge there in terms of that cost and not committing to take too long. For long leases. So flexibility, I think, is key. And I think as well in terms of those fixed assets, what we're seeing quite clearly in terms of commercial space is the continuation, certainly in the future, of people working from home. So that's going to free up space as well. So I think there's going to be capacity in the commercial property market, whether it's in food and drink retail or food and drink as an operator, as a head office. So I think there's some serious implications there in working from home and digital. Clearly, in terms of that commercial space, a lot of that fixed cost now can be switched into fulfillment centres and logistics and distribution. So you're going to see a change of use in commercial space, commercial property. So the needs are there, the usage needs are going to change as well. So yeah, as with the market itself and consumer behaviour, you're going to see a lot of change and different needs and different behaviours in that market.
So thank you, Paul. We've got a question from Felicity at Leapfrog PR, which again I think is actually related to that question. I'm interested in Paul's views on the blurring of lines between traditional retail and food service hospitality over lockdown. Restaurants getting into home delivery and retailers delivering meal kits or driving meal kits. If I were Pret, I'd get into home delivery and branded products in retail. So again, the blurring between food and retail is interesting. Well, what are your thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, and it's happening. I mean, you've seen a lot of brands, food brands, Starbucks a good example, Nando's have got retail brands, and ZZ are just about to launch a retail brand as well. So you're going to see more and more blurring of food service brands into the retail market. But I think the real significant change, which has presented itself, and one of the opportunities, is the fine food sector. What we're seeing are consumers wanting to take that restaurant experience in-home, and the opportunity for premium fine food, whether it's just for yourself and your family or having a small dinner party. Clearly, Christmas is fast approaching. There's a lot of uncertainty on what capacity you can entertain friends and family at Christmas, but you will be celebrating at home. So really think about how you can take that restaurant experience, that total experience in-home. And for those who have the ability to spend, why not hire your own chef and create that experience and that big event by having something really special. So there has been a clear market opportunity there for fine food and premium food in-home. And I think the area I touched on is working from home, lunchbox, as I've called it, do a gusto in terms of lunchbox. And Pret, as they say, we're following the consumer now. Subscription services have worked very well in lockdown. I was listening to a Microsoft webinar a couple of months ago now, and a lady set up in March a new business for books and set up a subscription service, and she's been absolutely back to back with business growth. And that book service, that subscription service, has really worked in building new customer loyalty. So subscription service is having a role to play in terms of food delivery, as Gusto, as HelloFresh, and Ocado to a certain extent. So think very sort of clearly about the opportunity for subscription service and the go-to place in terms of repeat orders. And breakfast. Breakfast, again, is another area of opportunity. We've seen significant growth in the out-of-home market and on the go with breakfast. We're working from home, so breakfast solutions, again, another area of white space of virgin country of home delivery for breakfast. So think about day part and fine dining in terms of the blurring between food service and in-home.
Well, we're right on time. Right on time, exactly where we are, Paul. So thanks for that. I mean, I wrote down 3 things actually from the webinar. One was thinking about the new business model. So there's, you know, as we saw from the customer journey, every part of our business model is going to be impacted. So we need to reinvent that. Consumer behaviors are changing, so we need to understand about those new behaviors and use data and analytics to help us understand that rather than perhaps guessing. And then, of course, you know, new leadership skills. So there's lots of things as business owners and leaders that we need to be doing. And I think the message, you know, I'd like to get across to people is you don't have to do this on your own. So there's lots of help available, but certainly Paul and I are available to help. And we'd very much like to talk to you all again. So Paul, thank you ever so much for that. I think it's some really fascinating stuff. It is a hugely important sector for the UK economy, food and drink. And I think there's some really useful and valuable insights in there, which we've been able to share this afternoon. So thank you very much, and look forward to catching up with everybody in a month's time. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.